Hi, I'm Andrew for GT Planet. We have been testing out Dirt 5 to put it through its paces to see how it stacks up and to give you our thoughts on it. So we have five sections, which are the content and value for money. We have the graphics, the sound design, driving physics and handling, and online features. And then we will produce the overall score and review at the very end. So, in terms of content and value for money, Dirt 5 ships with, depending on which version you buy, around about 60 cars. There's a few more bonus in the amplified edition, which also gets you the 3 days pre-launch preview. And yeah, it pretty much comes in as a love letter to rallying. There's cars from 40, 50 years of rally driving across loads of different rally disciplines, and they're all collected together into 13 different car groups, and there's some wonderful things in there. It goes down to strange lightweight stuff like the Aerial Atom off-road version, the Aerial Nomad, and it goes up to really strange stuff like off-road pickup trucks. There's rock bouncers, which are a space frame chassis with a big V8 engine that are designed to, as the name says, bounce off rocks. And it's basically a wonderful selection of rally cars, and I'm sure that over time we're going to see some more cars added to the list by DLC. In addition to that, there is the livery editor. Now, the editor itself is a little bit on the basic side. You can essentially select colours and patterns, which you have to unlock through gameplay. You have various areas of the car to customize with your preset patterns. There's a broad range of colours, a number of finishes, gloss and matte metallic, and there are sponsors that you can apply to the cars. Again, they appear in preset areas, so it's not as wide ranging as something that you would see in, say, Gran Turismo or Forza Motorsport. But it is functional, it does the job, it works well. More significant in terms of content is the playgrounds function. In essence, this allows you to create your own obstacle course arena out of a number of preset blocks, and there are several pages of options of various different types of blocks that you can use, and not just surfaces, but banks and ramps and pipes and jumps and water splashes, and there's all sorts of decorative things that you can place around. There's 3 different arena types that you can create, and it's actually really impressive. It's not a full course creator per se, restricted to these 3 arenas. It's essentially Minecraft-like. You can place blocks in the sky. They don't need to be necessarily supported on anything, and you can build your course up to them and down from them. And there's also a bunch of different game modes that you can play with the playgrounds as well. So there's checkpoints, there's a destruction course that you can set up, and it does add a much wider aspect to the game. So the playgrounds, that will come in particularly useful with the community part of the game, because you can create your own arenas and share them with other players, and they can download them and race on them and try and beat your times, and they can also review and rate them. So there's actually a PlayStation trophy and Xbox achievement available for rating someone else's playground. In addition, you've got the 10 main locations of Dirt 5. There's around 70 tracks within these 10 locations. A few of them, admittedly, are forward and reverse variations, but they do drive reasonably differently, and there are jumps and ramps in different places to add a little bit of variety to it. In general, the courses, the environments, they're very pretty, they're vibrant, they're full of life. You have the dynamic weather, which comes in and changes the whole atmosphere. You've got changes in time of day. Usually quite quickly, it will go dark within the space of a lap. Now, on the PlayStation 4 base console, you get the option of prioritizing frame rate or prioritizing detail. Now, we were running it in the frame rate mode primarily, which is pretty firmly locked to 60 frames per second. And we couldn't see any drop frames there. However, we did spot a few moments of screen tearing, and there are texture glitches here and there. That said, this is a pre-launch build. Generally speaking, apart from these few moments on the PlayStation 4, it's a reasonably good-looking game in terms of the environment. The cars themselves have been a little bit of a mixed bag. If you run it in the frame rate priority mode, there's not that much anti-aliasing going on. So when you get to the start of the race and you're looking at the lovely headlights of the cars, they're hexagons. That's not the case in the detail priority version. So it's a case of you either want it to look pretty or you want it to run smoothly. I think on the PlayStation 4 Pro, this is probably going to be less of an issue. In general, the cars seem unusually shiny, especially if you're in the livery editor, which they have a very strange sheen to them. But in gameplay, they're all decent looking, and it all clips along very, very nicely. So, in terms of sound design, I think it's pretty fair to say that I'm not quite the target age group for Dirt 5's music choices. That said, it does fit in very nicely with the culture of the game, being kind of like a celebration of extreme sports. That sort of leads into one of my main complaints, which I would probably say that the sound balance is far too tilted towards the music. It's very loud. It can drown out an awful lot of the other noises that are going on. Now, I did reach the point when I just muted it, and lots of the other ambient sounds came through. And it's a bit of a shame that these are pushed firmly to the background at the expense of the music. You can hear course announcers commenting on your jumping skills and all sorts of other little sound trinkets that you would probably miss if you kept the sound turned up to its default maximum level. That said, again, we've got things like the tyre squeal, which sounds very generic. I've got a particular bugbear with the Formula off-road cars with their big, chunky, triangular gripped tyres, which, if they're driving on tarmac, should sound like someone putting a hot dog sausage into a desk fan, but they just squeak and squeal as the car slides around. The car audio itself is great. I do particularly enjoy driving the Aston Martin DBX around, although it does feel quite sacrilegious driving something like that around these courses. But hey, that's what it's designed for. And so, generally speaking, if you can tolerate the excessively loud music, then yeah, it's a decent sounding game. So, if you're a big fan of the Dirt Rally series, you'll probably appreciate that those games have a particularly decent handling model for off-road driving. Now, if you're coming into Dirt 5 expecting the same, you're probably not going to be too happy. It's very much an arcade game. There's a very, very arcade feel to how the cars handle and behave, and Codemasters has not pretended otherwise. It is an arcade game. The cars do have a very basic sense of authenticity. The Nomad, with its peculiar rear engine layout, is very, very tail happy and prone to snapping sideways at you, as it should. The four-wheel drive cars, you tend to push on a little bit in the turn, so there is a sense of these cars are behaving largely how they ought. I have found a bit of a frustration with the collisions. They feel, I mean, there will be a lot of them because the AI is a little bit chaotic at the moment, but the collisions feel very much tilted in the AI's favour, almost like when you hit them they're solid and when they hit you, you're not. And that also extends to hitting out-of-course objects, hitting the track limits. It doesn't feel particularly great, and there are occasions when you will just plough around a course, smashing off the barriers, and you'll be slower than driving properly. So that's a little bit of a bugbear, but it is an arcadey game, so you would expect that sort of thing. With that in mind, there's no vehicle tuning. So if you're looking for something where you can set up your gearbox and your tyre pressures, then again, not the game for you. You can adjust some of the driving aids. There is a special driving aid which will allow you to drift more easily in the Gymkhana courses. But other than tweaking the traction control and the anti-lock brakes, that's as far as it goes for the tuning. So the online features of the game are essentially all of the regular game content that you will see throughout the single player game will be available in multiplayer. Initially, it will be curated lobbies with the team picking what they think are the best, the most enjoyable combinations from the single player, staging them as 12-player online multiplayer races. There's also going to be a bunch of additional party modes, which are designed at basically just kicking off and having fun. So we've had an article about those previously on GT Planet, and there are events like Vampire, where one car has to tag other cars to turn them into vampires and spread the vampirism around the 12-car lobby until there's no survivors. There's King, which players pick up a crown and the other players have to chase them around. There's Transporter, where they have to take an object to a destination. These are all fairly standard tropes of party modes, but these are all will all be coming. There are no private lobbies at the moment. That is something that Codemasters plan to add to Dirt 5 after launch, although we don't know when at the moment. But it should be a fairly decent online offering. So, having played through a good chunk of Dirt 5, I do have a few thoughts about the single player itself. And the first of those is it's somewhat haphazard. You will find yourself driving one particular car class at one particular event, and then you will progress to a completely different car class at a completely different event for no particular reason. There isn't really that sense of progression where you work your way through, say, classic rally cars at the various locations, and then you progress up to, say, modern rally cars. That there isn't that logical step-by-step process. You'll find yourself racing a Skoda Fabia rally car as one of your first vehicles, and then the very next thing you're doing is racing pre-runners, and then you're doing Formula Off-Road, and then you might be in classic rally, and then racing a GT car. And it seems a little disjointed. In addition to that, the main story that seems to only take place off screen. It's referred to several times in the podcast between events. However, you don't get to see the AJ racing against Bruno Durand. It's just something that's referred to. Now, this might come in at some point later in the game. I've only got through roughly the first third of the events, and they've had their climactic head-to-head. But I haven't actually seen any of it. It's just been something that's talked about in the background. As such, I don't really think that the game's single player works all that well. Obviously, it's there to allow you to unlock vehicle decals and sponsors, but it just seems like a chaotic series of things thrown together to keep you occupied. I think the strength really will be in the online multiplayer. That's going to be a lot of fun, because the driving itself is a lot of fun. So overall, we've given Dirt 5 a 3 out of 5 rating, and you can see from the ratings above, that's come from a 4-star rating for the content value, with, as we said, 60 cars from the history of rally, 10 really quite interesting locations, and obviously that playgrounds feature, which is going to give the game a lot of longevity. Graphics, 3 out of 5. Again, that has the caveat that this is applicable to the PlayStation 4 base version. And of course, we are looking at a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X release later in this month, with a few little enhancements. For sound design, again, we've gone for a 3 out of 5. That largely comes down to the excessive sound balance in favour of the music. Driving physics, it's unashamedly an arcade game, so it's not something that we can score particularly highly in that. And then the online features, obviously that's going to come at launch next week, and it should be more than enough to keep players occupied throughout the life of the game.